Hey there, welcome to Spaced 101's first video. This channel is all about astronomy and astrophotography, and I'm new at this, so using some of my off time during the COVID-19 pandemic here to do something constructive and useful, and hopefully something that everybody will find useful in terms of learning about astrophotography and all the factors that go into things like choosing a telescope. If you're getting into it for the first time, if you're new, there's a lot of information that's going to be coming at you on the internet and from salespeople. So we're going to try to, in this first video, sort of scrape through some of that and give you some basic information and some starting points on where you can look for information about telescopes, where to buy them. Depending on where you are, there's usually a telescope or astronomy type store around. There's a lot of factors you have to think about for the first time if you're thinking about getting into astronomy as a hobby. Some choices to be made, and don't regret those choices. It's really important to have a basic understanding of what you're getting into before you get there. Certainly before you go into a store. Salespeople can be a little bit zealous, and not all of them, but some will potentially maybe guide you to something that may be a little bit too much for you to start with, and you're going to be disappointed, you're going to be confused, and you're not going to like the hobby, and you're going to give it up, and that would be a real shame, because astronomy is an amazing hobby to be in. I've been doing astronomy since I was probably about 6 or 7 years old. My father got me started in it. My first object I ever looked at was the moon, which really blew me away. The second object he showed me was Saturn and the rings, and I've been pretty much hooked from that time in. And most of my life in this hobby slash interest has been visual astronomy. In the last 3 or 4 years, I decided to move into astrophotography, and that has been a real challenge, and I hope I can help you to get through some of the stages in that as well, so that you're learning by my mistakes. And trust me, I have made a lot of mistakes over the years, and I'm still learning today. I've been really fortunate to have some great mentors along the way who've helped me with some of the complex issues like stacking and processing images after you've taken them. And that alone can be very confusing as to what software to use. There's a lot of videos out there other than what I'm going to be doing. So you know what? Multiple sources is always good. I suggest everybody go out and watch a bunch of different videos. There's some great YouTubers out there in astrophotography, and using all of that sort of gathered knowledge, hopefully that will help you to get through some of the issues that I've had over the years, and with any luck you'll not have as many issues. You'll always have some issues, because that's honestly part of the hobby or the interest, and you may get a little frustrated at times. Weather can be one of our biggest frustrations. This winter has been terrible for astrophotography. Even today, it's pretty cloudy out there, and there's little to no hope of doing any imaging tonight. In my second video, which I've already done, which is kind of weird, I did the second before the first, you'll see some of the problems that I experienced in the actual imaging during the time I was imaging. I had a camera failure. found out what that was, had some balancing on the telescope issues, and we'll talk about all of that in other videos. So I hope you do find it all useful, and if you like me, or like the videos I should say, don't expect you to like me, feel free to subscribe, and hopefully we'll keep doing this, and it'll be useful to everybody who's watching. So here we go. There's a lot of options you can see just on this page alone. They vary anywhere from a few $100s, as low as, I think you can see, $430 for the Skywatcher Dobsonian telescope, and that can jump very quickly on up to something like you see here, which is the Celestron Roe Ackerman Schmidt astrograph. I know that's a mouthful and a lot to take in. That's what we, in short form, call a RASA telescope. RASA telescopes, if you're interested in doing visual astronomy and actually looking through the telescope, this is not the telescope for you. This is a dedicated astrograph, which means astrophotography telescope, and they're an amazing piece of machinery, but I recommend for people who are just getting started, this would probably not be the way to start out. There would be a steep learning curve in there, and again, it's better to start simple. Dylan O'Donnell, who's a YouTuber, does a lot of great astrophotography videos, had a sort of humorous video on the other day talking about the 500 rule in astronomy and astrophotography. And though it was done as a joke, basically he was saying anything under $500 is pretty much junk. Don't do it. And though he did it sort of as a joke video, really there's a lot in there in terms of truth. In this interest hobby, you really do get what you pay for, and I always recommend people start at a reasonable level. It's a small investment. You don't want to buy it for yourself or for someone in your family. Find out that really it's not a great interest for them or you, and you don't want to have dropped thousands of dollars basically for no good reason. So something like this is not a bad place to start, as you can see. Price-wise, they're relatively affordable. You can do a little bit of tie-in for guiding with your telephone, iPhone, and likely through an Android device as well. They are basically, this is a reflector telescope that I'm showing you here now. You can see there are some apps that run on the iPhone to help you along. And for visual astronomy, something like this is more than adequate to get you started. And of course, as you grow in the hobby, you're going to look at adding things, and eventually you're going to upgrade to another telescope. You can see here it does go as low as $233 for the Celestron StarSense Explorer. Again, not a horrible place to start. It depends on your budget. I mean, if you can't get up into that 500 plus range for a starter telescope, then just to see that you have an interest in the hobby and be able to look at some night sky objects, this is not a bad place to start. So one of the biggest problems with people getting started in astrophotography is they see all these amazing Hubble telescope images, and even on some of the boxes of these cheaper telescopes, they'll put these pretty images up there for you to look at, like this. And that's not what you're going to see through your telescope. Even with some of the most expensive telescopes that are out there today for the hobby and even professional level telescopes, this is not what you see. This is an image that you certainly may be able to take something not too dissimilar from later on, when you get more heavily into the hobby and you have specialized camera equipment and bigger, more powerful telescopes. Telescopes are basically big light buckets, and they gather light, and over time, if you have the right astrophotography camera equipment, you're building up images with multiple images in most cases, stacking those images on top of each other and building an image that will look not quite like that, but certainly you can get some very quality images out of a lot of the equipment out there today. So as I said earlier, you can get pretty deep into this interest / hobby. You can see by this particular brand of telescope, which is a Meade telescope, 16-inch LX800 ACF, $24,000 for the optical tube and the mount. And it can go up from there, trust me. I have a Celestron 14-inch, which I will be showing you later in this video, and I don't regret purchasing that particular telescope. It's been one of in a long line of telescopes that I've gone through over the years. I should have thought a little bit more about it at the time. I wasn't overly interested in astrophotography. I was more, again, in visual observing, and for that, it's a really great telescope. It's also a great telescope, I should say, for astrophotography, but it does have a lot of limitations. It is a big light bucket. It gathers tons of light, and I live in a very light polluted area, and that can be problematic for a big telescope like that. So again, depending on your budget, if you're going down a road like this, really think about what you're doing before you drop this kind of money on a telescope, unless you happen to be a researcher or something like that. I can't see, certainly as a starter scope, going anywhere near there, that kind of price range. So here's another option. Again, I know I talked about the 500 rule, but again, if you're just getting started and you're buying this for your child, or even yourself to some degree, and you're just getting started and you don't want to drop a ton of money, and you just want to kind of learn the night sky and be able to look at some of the planets and the moons around them, and certainly our moon, then this is not a bad price range to get into. These are smaller telescopes. They're pretty easy to set up, and again, there are different manufacturers out there. Two of the biggest ones are Celestron and Meade. There are others out there as well. Certainly take a look around the internet and see what price range is good for you. There are also different types of mounts you can get once you get in later on, and we'll talk about mounts in another video. But something like this is also not a bad starter for those who don't have a budget that fits something higher. I think the really important thing is to get into the hobby and be interested in it and grow in it. You don't need to start out big. I started out when my father was in the hobby with a bigger telescope because that's what he had, but I was very young. When I started purchasing my own telescope, I started with something pretty small, really. A small 8-inch Meade telescope, and it did me really well for a number of years. And I grew with the hobby, and now I have a lot of equipment and have invested a fair amount in that equipment. But again, make sure you have the interest before you get too far down the road. So I have two telescopes right now. The first one is my Celestron 14-inch Edge HD, which I'll show you some pictures of in the video in a little bit. The second telescope is a more recent acquisition, and I've only started to use it, and already I've run into some issues that I'm learning about, and hopefully later on can help you with if you happen to get this kind of telescope as well. So that particular telescope is more of a wide field telescope for visual or imaging. It's what's called an APO triplet, apochromatic, and I'm not going to get into what all that means right now, but it does work well as an astrophotography telescope, as well as a visual telescope. For the complete package for that one, minus some of the accessories that I had to buy later on, you're looking in the $4,000 range for that one. The Celestron telescope, well, yeah, that one was considerably more expensive. For everything that I have on it right now, I'm probably well into $40,000 plus, more probably on the plus with the telescope, the accessories. I have it in a SkyPod dome. Everything adds up. Again, it depends on how far you want to go in this hobby. I do recommend, as I said earlier, taking your time, do some research, look at what's available, ask questions, join a local astronomy group. Certainly here in Canada, they're all over the place, in just about every province. And ask questions online. There's some great groups like Cloudy Nights, although it can get a little hostile in there at times. People will give you their opinion. Certainly consider the opinion, but make the decision based on your knowledge and what you've learned in your research as you're getting into this for the first time, and as you go along in the hobby as well. Even at the stage I'm at now, I still get lots of people giving me their opinions on equipment and post-processing and all that sort of thing. And there are a few people that I listen to more closely than others. But again, you'll find that as well as you go along. So enjoy the hobby, get out, enjoy the night sky, and remember, everything in the universe is trying to kill us. That's all for now. Spaced Out 101.